Thank you very much for joining us today for this first webinar after the summer break on testing and certification of the HbbTV specifications to make sure that apps and devices comply with the specifications. That is an important issue and indeed one of the core missions of the HbbTV Association and its members. We are very happy to have two high-ranked people with us as presenters who know all about these issues and who will hold the presentations later on, followed by a Q&A. So you can post your questions during the presentation and make sure that you write everything down that you're interested in, and we will then make a selection and post the questions, the most interesting, most relevant questions we think, to the two presenters in the last around 15 minutes of this 1 hour session. I will quickly let you know that obviously the views of the presenters represent the presenters and their companies and not necessarily the views of the HbbTV Association. With us today, we have Van from the Samsung R&D Institute in Poland, joining us from Warsaw, and he's already on the screen, Bob Campbell, Dr. Bob Campbell from Eurofins Digital Testing in Bristol in the UK, and he's the Director of Engineering. He's going to start with his presentation, and I'm happy to share the screen now with Bob and his presentation. Thank you, Bob, that you could make it today, and we're all very excited.
Okay, hopefully is my screen showing now?
Yes, all working.
Great. Let me just hide things so I can get to the front. Okay, so welcome everybody. Nice to speak to you all today. I'm going to try and rush through some slides that outline what HbbTV has been doing and tools that it's got that support certification and compliance, and how various regimes have made use of those in their certification and logo programs. So there's a few sort of opening remarks here on how different regimes have been successful, and they've typically combined a combination of consumer marketing directly of the features and the services that they are offering to consumers with a nice shiny logo and some fancy advertising. And there's some links here in the slides. I won't show them now, but you'll get the slides afterwards, and you can have a look at the advertising campaigns from the UK, Spain, and New Zealand. Behind that, they've set up a consumer-facing logo, and an agreement is in place that manufacturers will abide by the requirements of that logo program to get that on their devices. And then when a consumer goes to the shop, they know exactly what to look for to get the services that they've seen advertised. And behind all of that is some kind of conformance testing regime where manufacturers are required to meet a minimum set of requirements, including using test material and doing some application testing, and that all builds confidence in the system that lets consumers get what they expected. This sort of triangle here shows you the components of a testing ecosystem that HbbTV has helped put together. We have a device test suite, we have Plugfest, we have a content validator, and a reference app. There are a range of things that need to be looked at, and the components of an overall system include app testing and field testing as well. Why is this important? Because, as we all know, there are some big players in the market, but also a long tail of smaller players, and you're targeting a range of different devices and a horizontal platform, and you need to hit as many consumers as possible, so interoperability becomes a real challenge across those different devices. So what has HbbTV been putting together and doing for the system, for the ecosystem? Obviously, Plugfests are a really useful way to get application developers and manufacturers together They've been operating for many, many years through the HbbTV Association at IRT's facilities in Munich. There's a photo there of one going on, and it's a very ad hoc and free thing for people to turn up to. It's even open to non-HbbTV members, and it allows you to put your device together with an application and flesh out issues and try and get to the bottom of them. On top of that, HbbTV invested in extending the DASH-IF conformance software, DASH Validator as it's often commonly known, with DVB support to help validate streams are compliant with HbbTV and DVB profiles of DASH. The tool and the software is open source, available online with the front end, and you put your MPD in and it checks the MPD and the segments and various requirements and specifications. And it's useful for content generators and service providers to check their producing conformant DASH, but also manufacturers use it if something's not working to see if there's an issue in the stream. So that tool was built or is extended by DVB and HbbTV. In addition to that, HbbTV has produced a reference app, and the link's there for you to go and have a look. It's a example of how to build an application and the content that will work on a range of receivers in the market. It's been tested against a huge number of existing models and manufacturers' devices, and it's available under an open source license, and all the documentation is there, so people should be able to extend it and replicate it and look at the content and how it's been produced, so that there should be no lack of guidance there for how to get DRM and these features working on devices. So that reference app's been produced, and then of course we have the HbbTV test suite, which Van is going to go on to talk about in a lot more detail, but there are a huge number of test materials covering all sorts of different areas of the specification, and it's continually being maintained and updated, issues found and raised and fixed, and it's the core of the HbbTV compliance regimes on which other platforms build, and I'll go on and explain that a little bit more in the next few slides. So what the test suite tries to do is build a platform to test on. If you only test with a certain application, you may only test a certain number of APIs, and of course other bits that you might go on to depend on in a new app haven't been tested. So what the test suite tries to do is replace all of that with executable tests on each of the APIs that are important in the specification, and on the top of that there may be specific extra features that your platform depends on that would be added in a regime-specific test suite. So that's why we have a test suite. So what's the difference between doing that with the reference app? The reference app is better at representing more complicated use cases, but it's less objective. It's not obvious what it means to pass the app, whereas a test suite has a very clear definition of the pass criteria, and it's more suitable for use in a formal program of certification, where it's clear exactly what's been tested and is used in a whole load of different regimes. But both are useful and both have a huge amount of value in an interoperability program. In addition, application testing is necessary, and application developers need to test their app themselves, obviously, but also they need to check on different devices. There aren't emulators that are fully representative of the HbbTV environments, and so you do need to go and test on devices. They're often constrained by resources and the browser platform, so where possible you should try and automate and use devices to get the best experience for your applications on the different devices that exist over the different years. Knowing that there is an ongoing problem of interoperability in an open horizontal platform like HbbTV, the association formed a task force some years ago now to try and help address some of the issues, and this Improving Interoperability Task Force, the IITF, that I chair, is there to try and identify issues. It's coordinating Plugfest's times and dates. It's soliciting feedback from industry on interoperability issues, and it has helped introduce and manage the development of the reference app and the validator. So this is a call also to people who are interested in this problem and want to contribute to get involved. And there's a link there below also to some of the resources that I've mentioned on HbbTV's website. So how does this all come together in different certification regimes? So firstly, a quick explanation of what a regime actually means. It's a program that achieves the conformance with various requirements through a testing program where a manufacturer will either self-test or go to a test center to run the test materials, get a test report. There might be some additional levels of certification, like an application, or making sure that the look and feel meets the brand guidelines, that kind of thing. And all of that enables access to a consumer logo and the premium services that might be available. So for an example, TV has a number of different logos applicable to different devices that you get based on what you're supporting. It has some specific constraints or challenges due to the legacy of its MHP platform. That means some special tests are needed to ensure coexistence with that, and other certain requirements that are local to that particular platform, like the DRM and so on. So there's a local platform specific test suite that builds on top of the HbbTV test suite, and then general broadcast and satellite tests. France, on the other hand, was one of the earlier adopters, but didn't introduce mandatory conformance. And although it thought about a logo, it was never deployed. And as a result of that, there's been a sort of difficulty in adoption of HbbTV by the broadcasters, because the support for different versions wasn't consistent, and there was a sort of fall to the lowest common denominator a little bit. The result's been that France nearly abandoned HbbTV altogether, but as we know, some new initiatives are starting up in France, and new developments are taking place that hopefully will address that and reinvigorate HbbTV in France. For the UK, Freeview Play was launched very successfully. Again, has a similar problem to Italy of needing to address the coexistence with their legacy platform of MHEG, and added some additional requirements as well, and was really interested in making sure that that was robust, and so created its own set of tests for certain areas, and then builds again on the HbbTV core test suite. On top of that, it also requires you to do a lot of testing of the various players, the iPlayer being the one that people are most familiar with, the BBC iPlayer, but also other ones, and that's all part of the test regime that manufacturers need to complete to get the logo on their devices. In Spain, there was TDT Hybrida launched, which has been followed up now by Loves TV, which is the sort of consumer brand for the application, and has been hugely successful as well. On top of the TDT Hybrida basic testing of the compliance with the specifications, there's Loves TV application testing required, and interoperability labs have been run by Cellnex to improve the compliance of devices with the applications and improve interoperability, and they've been run by them in Spain on a number of years. Germany has a more self-serve approach, and again has suffered a little bit from the difficulty of telling which version of HbbTV is supported, and so applications have to be carefully written to work on all sorts of different versions and with all sorts of different features. Most recently, there's been an update to that specification by the Deutsche TV platform, and there are some additional tests to follow. Whereas Freenet TV had a more strict regime, and again built on HbbTV with additional tests and other regime-specific requirements as we've seen in some of the other platforms. And then just to round it all off, a couple of other examples. Australia, again, has a very clear logo that's been advertised, has a HbbTV core test suite and some additional regime-specific tests for DRM particularly. And Freeview New Zealand, very similar to Australia, in fact, but also has its own slightly different set of test requirements, and both have been very successful. So just to summarize my part, as we know, HbbTV is still a challenge for interoperability. It's an ongoing problem, but it can be solved with multiple approaches to test and certification, using the official test suite, some additional country-specific requirements as necessary, and a certification regime that's robust, and app testing and interoperability testing and plugfests. All of those things come together to address this problem. And there will continue to need to be slight variations for different local markets, when we recognise that, and that's natural in this kind of platform. And that's it from me. I'll pass over to Van now, who's going to go into a little bit more detail about the test suite.
Yes. Thank you very much, Bob, for this very interesting presentation from, let's say, the heart of HbbTV, testing and certification and the challenges. Very interesting. Just a very quick note for all of you who have had trouble viewing the presentation, the slides. You will be sent an email tomorrow as a registered participant automatically, and this will contain a link to the presentations and an option to watch the recording of this webinar on YouTube. So don't worry if you had trouble viewing the slides. And another thing, if you want to ask questions to the two presenters, and don't hesitate to send them through the chat function of the webinar software. Click on the chat icon, a little text window opens, and you can just type in the questions you have, and we'll happily answer them at the end of this session. Now from Bristol in the UK over to Warsaw in Poland. Welcome, Ben, and we are all looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jörn. So let me share my presentation.
Yes, Thomas in the back office will turn you into the moderator, and then you can share your screen. Sorry if this takes a moment. Sometimes the system isn't the quickest. Yes, you're now the moderator, and you should be able to share your screen. Very good. We can see something.
So can you see my screen?
Brilliant. Now it's working. Thank you.
Something is wrong. Okay, so hello everyone. Since I often get questions about device compliance and the use of test suite in certification process, I'd like to address these questions in my today presentations. Here's an agenda. The presentations will give you an overview of tools and procedures used for device testing and certification. Let us start first with the testing workflow in HbbTV. These slides will answer the questions why it takes so long to publish tests for the new version of the spec. The first work with test, which is writing the test descriptions, is done by specification group along with writing the spec. Because HbbTV principle is that the spec cannot be published as long as test descriptions are not developed and approved. Test implementations are required when the spec is published. And in the next phase, the tests are reviewed and approved by the testing group. And as you can see here from the chart, specification and testing cycles are independent of each other. And testing cycles include also a review and approval process for challenges, not only for new tests. And the test suite is released 3 times a year, always in March, July, and November. This is to meet manufacturers' cycles of device development. And it's happened that it may take several releases to publish tests developed for specific features in the spec. Usually, it takes from 6 to 18 months to get tests for a new published spec. So now going to the HbbTV test system, which is necessary for device testing. This slide gives you information what is needed apart from test suite to do a device verifications. So the test system consists of a test suite and a test environment, which is not delivered with the test suite. The test environment in turn include two major components, the standard test equipment and the test harness. The first component, the standard test equipment, is a collection of, let's say, off-the-shelf tools which are needed to source, generate, and play out the test cases on the device. It includes device under test, which is TV or set-top box, DVB playout system, and maybe one or more devices such as wireless access point, Ethernet switch, or an IP router to connect web server and the device. And the second component, the test harness, in the other hand, is necessary for supporting test execution and report generation. It uses specialized JavaScript APIs to communicate with test applications running on the receiver and to log results. And the test harness also allows automation of many of the test cases. And here it's worth to mention that implementation of test environment is an individual decision. The components may be physically installed on a single PC or on commonly accessible machine. They may be as well virtualized or integrated into commercially available tools. So it's all depends on the test suite licenses, expertise, and policy. Here's an example how the test system can be implemented. I will not go into details now. This slide is for you to look at after the webinar if you are interested in how to set up test environment. I'd just like to show you here that the test suite is just one block in the whole system. And before presenting the test suite, I'd like to go quickly through the other testing publications published by the testing group. Most of people do not know about existence of these publications, but they may save you lots of time since you can find the answer to many questions you have when using the test suite. So this includes, first of all, test specifications, which describe the technical process for HbbTV device verifications. This is useful for all subjects involved with device testing from HbbTV testing centers through quality assurance departments of HbbTV licenses to test material providers and reviewers. The second publication is the test assertion repository, which will be available soon. This is a dynamically updated list of approved tests. It gives you a live picture of the test suite between releases. And another publications mostly targeting test material providers and reviewers include XML test schemas and document describing the process of test approval and challenge. So now going to the HbbTV test suite, this slide gives you general information on how the test suite can be used. The test suite consists of a number of test cases, and each test case is intended to verify a specific requirement of the HbbTV specifications. And please remember that the test suite does not include any physical equipment such as the stream player, modulator, or IP server, as I mentioned before. The test cases in a test suite can have one of two statuses. Approved test cases approved by testing group and form part of the requirements for HbbTV compliance. And additional test cases are not approved by the testing group for compliance, but they are distributed because they may be useful for developers. And the test cases may be changed from additional to approved if they have been successfully reviewed for approval by the testing group. Also, there is a group of additional tests developed by the third parties, which is Nordic and OIPF. And these tests are published with HbbTV test suite, but they will never be approved by HbbTV. HbbTV Association is celebrating 10th anniversary this year, so it's a good occasion to mention the history of the test suite as well. This slide gives you the picture on how the test suite is changing over the time. So the first test suite was released in May in 2012 with just 250 test cases. And since 2015, the test suite, apart from approved tests, also include additional tests. In 2016, the YPF and HbbTV tests developed by Nordic for this market were added to the test suite. And since 2018, the test suite release cycle is adapted to the manufacturer cycles of device development. So now we have 3 releases a year. The first 2 releases in March and July are major releases and include new test cases, while the release in November is the minor release and includes only test fixing. Also, since 2018, there is new rule for the test suite name, which consists of year number and a number of the release in the year. And most recent release in version 2022, which means the second release this year, was published in July and includes exactly 2,759 test cases in total, which is more than 10 times increase compared with the first release. These slides contain full information about test suite volumes and approved percentage from the beginning of the test suite history. This is for you to look at after the webinar if you are interested in detailed figures in a specific release. This is a very important slide in the presentations because it addresses the most common questions I got, which is that what is the content of a test suite and how many tests were developed for different versions of the spec. So first of all, it is important to know that there is no separate test suite for every version of the spec. And each test suite release includes tests for all spec versions. And the test suite does not cover all the possible features in the spec. So what is in the test suite 2022? 80% of the tests in this release cover features from the core HbbTV spec. And by core HbbTV spec, I mean HCTS 102.796 from version 1.1.1 to version 1.5.1. The other 13% are tests for 2 other HbbTV independent specs, operator applications, and targeted advertising. And 7% are tests for OIPF and the tests developed for Nordic market. Here, the chart in the right side shows the number of tests developed for the features in different versions of core HbbTV spec. And you can see that more than 600 tests for basic HbbTV features available from version 1.0 apply to all spec versions. And then almost 1,000 tests apply to version 1.5 and above. Almost 2,000 tests apply to version 2.0.1 and above. And exactly 2,146 tests apply to the last version of the spec, version 2.0.2. This slide shows you the test approval process in HbbTV and the differences between the approved and additional test cases. HbbTV has a rigorous process for test material approval to ensure it's high quality. So the tests have to go through 2 processes to be included into the test suite. First, the developed tests are delivered in packages. The package pass initial acceptance if there is no issues found in at least 50% of the tests in the package during initial review process. The initial accepted tests then become candidates for the next process, the final approval. And the test becomes approved if it passes test review and successfully executed in at least 1 device, or if there is no device implementation available for test verifications, then it must have no issues raised for 4 months. The initially accepted but not approved tests are included as additional tests in the release. And if the test is challenged after release publications, then it must be fixed and go through the final approval process again to be included into the next release. A testing event is the last phase in the approval process which the tests undergo. And the event is very important because this is the first time when many test cases can be verified in device implementations. And also, this is the last verification that the tests go through before they become approved. The testing event it's an opportunity for test material providers to validate tests on not typically available for them devices, and for HbbTV implementers to analyze device implementation issues. The testing events are organized by the testing group 3 times a year before every test suite release. And the next event will take place in October, and it will be the last event this year. This slide is also an important one. It gives you information how to get access to the test suite. So the test suite is available for HbbTV members for use in their own facility. And non-members can access the test suite through HbbTV registered test centers. And the list of test centers can be found in the HbbTV website, and you can also find their information how to become an HbbTV registered test center. And early access to test materials before official release is granted only to members who contribute to testing activities. This slide shows you the scenarios where the test suite can be used in the certification process. So in the first scenario, the manufacturer is doing the testing either by running the test suite themselves or has the test center running the tests on their behalf, and then declare HbbTV compliance. In the second scenario, the manufacturer is also doing the testing, but delivers the results to the certification body, and then get certification for compliance from the certification body. And in the third scenario, the manufacturers submit their product for testing to a test centers appointed by certification body. And here I'd like to draw attention to the information in the HbbTV website. I will read the quote now. Why the HbbTV test suite is designed to be as clear, complete, and comprehensive as possible, and constitute a major goal of HbbTV, it's not possible to guarantee that the test suite has a complete coverage of the specifications. The test suite alone does not provide a definitive measure of receiver compliance and makes no provision for testing application compliance. This slide gives you information about basic steps which should be considered when doing device testing and verifications. So the first step is to decide how to do the testing. For in-house testing, HbbTV members who have necessary expertise and equipment can get test suite license and set up the test environment themselves. The others should choose an HbbTV registered test centers to run the test suite on their behalf. A commercial certification should be always done by HbbTV registered test centers. The next step is to select tests for testing or certifications. Depends on the application versions and the features implemented in the applications. And please have in mind that applications usually do not use all features defined in the spec. So the expectation for devices to pass also tests which cover features not implemented, and there is no plan for implementation in the apps may increase cost and time needed for device introduction to the market. On the other hand, if application use features which have no test coverage, then developing new specific tests may be required. Another thing, certification bodies should have in mind that tests can be challenged after test suite publications. And it means that the list of tests today may differ from the list of tests of the same release a week ago. And certification bodies should be able to handle and waiver process in order not to block certification and launching new products into the market. And here's an important message that Bob already mentioned in his presentations. The device certification alone does not guarantee the success of HbbTV implementation in the market because interoperability issues can be caused by no-compliant applications. Therefore, broadcasters and manufacturers should work together to elaborate a system to ensure device and apps interoperability. This slide is to give you some information about the testing group and what support you can get from the group. So the group is responsible for the test approval and challenge process, test suite and other testing publications maintenance. We also act as technical arbitrations between test material providers and test suite users. And we are supporting test suite licenses and test material providers. So if you have any issues related with testing you'd like to discuss, then you are invited to join our call on every other Wednesday afternoon. The next one will be next week. This is the last slide, which I hope will encourage you to contribute to HbbTV testing activities. So why to contribute to the testing activities and other activities in HbbTV? To ensure that company products meet requirements before it's published, because you will have early access to the spec drafts and test materials. To be ready for product launch when new version of standard is published, because if you start development after standard publication, then it may turn out that it's too late. Also, to meet other leaders from the industries to share and learn from their experiences. And last but not least, to influence on HbbTV development strategy. So how to contribute? You can contribute to either developing or funding test description or test implementations. You can also contribute to test review or support test material providers on test validations. And I think that's it. And with this call for contributions, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for your attention. And if you have any questions, then I'm happy to answer in the Q&A session. And now back to Jörn.
Thank you, Ren, for this very interesting and deep look into the area of testing and specification. We are happy to discuss your questions right now. We quickly switch on the webcam again. This is live. By the way, 187 people have registered to participate in this webinar, and most of them are actually live here with us. So great to see this great interest, and we're now happy to move on to the Q&A section. I've made notes regarding a couple of questions that you've lined up, and let me see. Thomas, can you make me the moderator so I can share my screen, please? Yes, I am the moderator, so I can share my screen with you in a moment. Right, share my screen. Okay, there you go. These are the first questions that have come in, and it's quite a lot, as you can see. The first one that popped up was, could you give some examples of tests for companion devices, and how do you think on robustness for companion devices? Any of you, Bob or Van, if you have a comment to make?
Okay, so companion screens are the features included into the version 2.0.1 of the spec. So we have a numbers of tests for companion screens. I do not remember exactly the number, but I think the hundreds of the tests already, and they are now included in the version 2022 of the test suite.
Yeah, I'd add there are some specific tests for sort of the initiation of an application on a companion screen and synchronization between that and a TV. For the answer to your question, the HbbTV test suite list is published on the HbbTV website under that resources link in my slide deck. So the best thing to do is go there, and you can actually see a list of the tests that are published, and then you can look into that and search for companion screen, and there's a whole selection there. As far as the second part of the question about robustness, I think it's fair to say that this is a relatively new, although it came in HbbTV2, I don't think it's been widely deployed and widely used yet, and so I would expect that this is an immature area, and work would be needed to check that and do a lot of testing between the companion device and the device under test. So yeah.
Right. The second question, as you can see live, I'm editing this live. There are new questions coming in. Is there a companion testing program for HbbTV emission conformance?
Nothing formal. There is nothing in place to do formal certification of an HbbTV transmission. However, the DASH Validator is useful in that context for checking the broadband component of a DASH system. But no, there's nothing formally in place for that. It's more difficult to do for emissions. There are lots of components and equipment in place, and it's difficult to make a formal program that would work for that side of the puzzle.
Okay. A live one coming in. I may have missed this in an earlier slide, but can someone advise whether Freeview UK follows a self-certification model, or do the manufacturers also have to follow other mandatory requirements?
So my understanding is that it is self-certification up to the point where they will ask for a device for audit, and they may do some checks themselves, but you can certainly get the Freeview Play test suite and the HbbTV test suite and self-test all of the basic tests. There is some application testing parts to that, which and look and feel guidelines that need to be met, and so Digital UK require a sample device to audit.
Okay. Hi Ben, a question directly to you. These days, how many companies have been working on HbbTV testing activities actively? So how many are actively involved? Because you were early on telling us or encouraging other companies to participate. And of course, many thanks for the presentation.
So now in the testing group, we have 15, 16 members actively contribute to the activities.
Okay. Bob has already answered a couple of questions directly in the chat system that address specific issues, so I'm not going to go into these. Instead, I would like to focus on France, because you've mentioned France earlier on. Bob, this looks like a special case where Salto seems to be revamping HbbTV following the break where HbbTV was virtually non-existent. You mentioned this. This is obviously great news for the HbbTV community, with Salto, the French joint commercial and public TV platform, launching, I think, in October this year. Do you think that a conformance regime is also on the verge to start in France?
So there was a recent press release from several of the broadcasters involved, and they've set up something called a TET to look into this, and they've announced in that press release that they are calling for a logo to be used to ensure that TVs are compatible with their requirements. I'm not quite sure how far that has progressed and where that's got to in their process, but they're certainly talking about something like that, and they have been looking into it.
Okay, another live one. Will HbbTV include HLS at some time?
I think that's a question to take to the specification group or the requirements group, frankly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a question for, is there a common requirement for that across different platforms? And if so, then it would follow through the requirements process and specification writing process and then into testing.
Yes, as you know, the HbbTV Association it consists of several working groups that deal with specific issues and aspects. And if you have specific questions, check out the HbbTV website at hbbtv.org, where you can see the different working groups and their chairs, and you can directly address them if you have specific questions, and they will happily respond. And of course, you are all invited to actively participate in these groups to include your thoughts, views, products, and services. Another one, can you indicate typical problems discovered during the testing process? So what are typical issues arising during these testing procedures? I think both Van and Bob can say something on that.
Van, do you want to go first?
Maybe you first.
Okay, I noted down some of the things that we found when we did our survey in the IITF a few years ago that people noted as issues, and there's a whole different range of different things, but areas that people brought up was around the use of Dash, and that live was a bit more of a challenge compared to on demand, and that's one of the things we addressed in the reference app. So there's some examples of live Dash there. Compatibility of services with different profiles. We've done some work there to produce the validation tool, and providing the example content again in the reference app. Transition, so ad insertion, and we're working on some examples for ad insertion at the moment in the reference app. So those are the kind of things that have come up. There are all sorts of different areas that people find difficult during the testing process in their different platforms. So there aren't too many common problems, we hope, because we try and address them through these applications and tools as best we can. But do bring them up to us if you have some you're aware of that affect multiple platforms, because we would like to work on them.
Okay. Then anything to add?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenge every time we have the test for new technologies. For example, now the test for NDA, MPEG H and AC4, MPEG H especially, because there is no device implementations to verify the test cases. So that it's the big challenge we have every time when there is a new technologies are involved.
Right, stay with you, Van. You're the expert for the test suite, as you've gone very deeply into these issues and the test suite, how it works and functions. What is planned in the next test suite release? Can you go a bit into that?
Yeah, we plan to include more tests on media synchronizations, and also we have planned for the targeted advertising test. At this moment, it's 90 tests for targeted advertising, and it's, as I remember well, that the 250 tests planned for targeted advertising. And I hope that this test will be available, part in the next release in November, and all in the first release in 2021.
Okay, now we've got feedback from Freeview. Anyone wishing to further understand Freeview Play conformance, the process, can contact Mike, and here's his email address. So I'm sure it's all right to publish that here. So please get in touch with Mike. Thank you very much for offering this. There is a addressable TV question coming up. Let me put that here for all of you to see. How thorough are the addressable and targeted TV advertising tests in the latest test suite? And great presentation, by the way. Can you respond to that, anyone?
Well, as Van just said, I think we've got a portion of the full TA spec covered in the material that's available now, and then a larger proportion to follow in a future release. Van, you had the numbers there, didn't you? I can't remember what they were.
Yeah, actually, we have 6 packages of the targeted advertising, and now we have 50% of each of packages already in the version 2022 of the release of the test suite.
Van, they're as additional material, aren't they, at the moment?
Yes, yeah. So some of those are already approved, but some are still additional.
Yeah, which means that there's a process still to go through to sort of flush out any issues and make sure they're fully complete. So I guess in answering how thorough they are, there's work still to do from where we're at today.
Okay. How relevant is the TA theme for CMs? Another live question.
I'm not quite sure I understand what the question, what is what's a CM? I'm assuming TA.
I have the same.
I'm wondering myself. So let me see who posed that question. Please do indicate what you mean. Guido, please quickly indicate if you can what you mean with CMs, and we'll go back to that. Another question: how long does it take manufacturers to make products compliant with the new specification? Is there any time frame you can indicate?
Yeah, so usually it takes from 6 months to 18 months to get the test for a new published spec. And then manufacturer also needs some time for device implementation. Usually manufacturers have 1 year cycles, product cycles. And it takes from 1 to 2 years to implement.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we look at the version 2.0.1, the spec was published in 2016, and I think that Italy was the first country who introduced 2.0.1, and this was in 2018, if I remember well.
Okay, now we have feedback regarding the question we puzzled. How relevant is TA theme for manufacturers? That was the question.
Well, I don't know, Van, if you want to answer that.
So please.
Well, I think it's clear that targeted advertising is a feature that's most of interest to broadcasters and operators. Advertising is one use for it, but also public broadcasters can use it to do content replacement for, say, local news stories and that kind of thing. So it's of interest more to that side. There's a note, and it's worth looking into the specification for that. But there needs to be agreement with the manufacturer partners in order for that to be supported, and I think it's way beyond the remit of HbbTV to say how that might work, but I think there are means to make that interesting to manufacturers, and there's certainly a less relevance for this feature to manufacturers. It doesn't necessarily add an awful lot to a device, just a lot of complexity and performance challenges. But I recommend reading the TA specification for some discussion on that. That's worth noting.
Okay, last question for the moment. When will DVB-TA be included in the test suite? I think we can also add HbbTV-TA probably.
Yeah, I mean, again, I hope we've answered the question in the sense that the HbbTV material focuses really on HbbTV's element of the TA requirements. HbbTV is typically not provided tests for pure DVB features, but I think what we have in the HbbTV test suite is a set of tests that do include, for example, DVB streams, broadcast streams with adverts delivered over broadband. So I think the answer to that question is we are adding it now, but maybe the question was put forward by somebody who has some specific bits of DVB parts of TA they think should be in the test suite. But as Van said, there's some tests now, and the remainder coming. I guess, Van, the answer to when that will all be complete is we hope by March in the next release.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one, I think we're going to wrap it up now, is are independent specs leading to approved or additional specs?
So an independent.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to?
It's the question that independent spec lead to approved or additional tests, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, so an independent specification stands on its own, the tests for an independent specification are added as additional tests, but can be approved. They just aren't required as part of certification to HbbTV.
It's actually for two independent HbbTV spec, the operator applications and targeted advertising, we approve the test. So the tests have the same status as for core HbbTV spec. The additional tests include only tests from OYPF and the Nordic.
Okay, very much. Thank you very much for the responses to our questions, and of course, indeed, for the presentations. As you can see, we will resume this webinar series in October, on October the 21st. This will focus on application discovery over broadband ADB phase 2 with variants and IRT. In mid-November, there will be another one on the HbbTV op app, and this time a specification update, and that will be released by that time. And in December, early in December, the last one for this year, will focus on use cases for HbbTV apps and services. Next year, we're going to continue. As you can see, a couple of topics already in line, and dates will have to be confirmed. You will receive an invitation for the October 21st webinar, which will be the next one in this series automatically as you register for this one. So don't worry, you'll get that in time and you can register for this next webinar. Right, this leaves me to say thanks again to our two presenters and your great presentations. You will receive an email with links to the presentations for download as PDF and the recording footage of this webinar on YouTube tomorrow around the same time today. And if you have any ideas for further webinars, please do get in touch with the HbbTV Association at webinar@hbbtv.org, and we're very happy to discuss these. At the end of this webinar, there'll be a short survey, and this helps us making these webinars even more interesting for you. So please don't close the software. Once the session is over, there'll be a survey popping up, and you're very much welcome to quickly respond to that, just 2 or 3 questions. Thank you once again to our speakers. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.